Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue à tout le monde. Thank you for joining us today for our second session of Deep Looking. I'm happy to have one lovely participant in the gallery with me today, and all of you joining us online. Merci à le Centre Culturel Artem for supporting this and our other programming, which is aimed at combating social isolation and improving mental health for our entire community and further abroad by using art as a therapeutic tool. So without further ado, today we will be looking at Felicity Buchel's Reframing. This artwork is a mixed media on canvas, and to give you a sense of the size, it's 20 inches by 20 inches. So the first thing we'll do is I'll invite you to let your eye roam over the canvas and just see what elements pull your eye first. This work is an interesting mix of calmer, cool colors and more warm electric colors towards the center. We're just joining two more new participants to the gallery. Please take a seat. We've just begun. So as you let your eye wander across the canvas, I'll remind you we're looking at Felicity Buchel's Reframing. And it's a 20 by 20 mixed media on canvas. So when you're looking at the piece, I suggest that you just take a moment to see where your eye naturally falls, where the artist has sort of led you as you're looking. Myself, I often start at the top left-hand side. As in Western culture, we're taught to read. You start with the top left hand and you make your way towards the bottom right-hand corner. In this case, we see two pieces of birch bark that have been applied vertically, which sort of interrupts that natural wandering of the eye from one corner to the other. The artist has used very soft, cool colors in that top left-hand corner. But the longer you look, the more you notice how they've been layered with these sort of soft pink cotton candy clouds on the top and cooler, darker blues and grays underneath. As you move your way towards the middle of the canvas and the middle ground, we see a dark blue mass, possibly trees in the distance. And on top of that, there's four vertical dark lines with the sort of electric orange and yellow impasto sort of blobs of color on top. So I would suggest while the cooler colors, the sort of soft cotton candy clouds are calming, that sort of electric mass in the middle suggests energy and life. The artist has chosen to show us trees in fall, which come out in these oranges and yellows and reds. And as we look at the shape of the paint and the forms that it takes, while the top of the painting is very much smoothed over and it looks almost like it's been sanded, in the middle ground, we see these fat blobs of color that look like they've been applied quickly and gesturally. You can almost imagine the artist's hand moving across the canvas in quick strokes, not worrying about smoothing out the paint blobs or making them even levels of thickness or even sort of strokes. As we move down towards the bottom of the piece, we see now the warmer colors are actually in the background with the darker blue and grays kind of layered on top. Just above the last piece of birch bark at the bottom, we see that red blob, perhaps fallen leaves with black, sort of inky lines on top. And there's also this irregular shape of the birch bark in the bottom right-hand corner. That's not quite as straight as its counterparts on the left-hand side. Looks like it's been torn perhaps a little quicker. So now that we moved from the top of the piece to the bottom, I would suggest that we move from the lowermost layer, that sort of smooth, partially sanded application of paint that the artist has applied with those blues and grays. And we see the blue is stronger in the top right-hand corner, suggesting perhaps a break in the clouds, a little more clarity with the sun. And as we move up from the ground of the canvas, we see those blacks, those black sort of shapes, the trees and bushes perhaps at the bottom. And then again at the sort of foremost layer would be those thick blobs of paint, that sort of energy on the top. So the surface of the canvas itself is much more still. Maybe we would imagine that it's even like a puddle or a lake with a smooth surface. And on top of that has floated the autumn leaves, those bright colors, and the pieces of birch bark. Now we can take some time to consider the title of the piece, which of course isn't always available to us, but we're fortunate with this contemporary piece it is. And it's been titled Reframing. So as we sit and contemplate the piece, we can consider what exactly that refers to. Is it the trees that have been framed with the birch bark? So sort of literally with a piece of themselves, they've been framed. The trees that look so alive with those bright colors and quick movements. The birch bark, which is now no longer part of the tree, no longer alive, frames the more living element. We might also think about how the cooler colors, the blues in the sky and the blue-gray at the bottom, create a frame for the trees as well, although it is certainly more receding than the birch bark. The birch bark itself forms a way, sort of literally a frame, but also a direction for us to look at the piece, to sort of tell us where it ends. As you can imagine, if you were standing in front of this scene itself, it is endless, right? We could turn around and see a completely different scene, especially in Northern Ontario, where we're so lucky to be able to see similar scenes kind of anywhere. One wonders as well, this piece is constructed in such abstracted forms, in the way that things sort of appear to us in a dream. And dreams which have a way of sort of reframing our everyday experiences. When one dreams of places that seem familiar or seem like places you know but are always just slightly different, slightly reframed, reconstructed. As these trees are reconstructed with paint, and of themselves, of course, with the bark on top. It's also a good time to think about the natural materials that are used. Perhaps not directly in this piece, but recalled by the dark black, the ink, which can be made from so many natural ground-up materials, charcoal and others. And with that, that concludes today's deep looking exercise. I invite you to spend more time looking at the piece itself and thinking about how the surface decoration and forms can tell us more about the artwork, especially in the absence of something like an artistic description. While these things are very useful to hear directly from the artists themselves, it's important that we train our own eye to look for clues in artworks and scenes that come before us. Just as doctors and nurses are often trained in these sorts of exercises so that they can help figure out what the real complaint of a patient is when they come in. So as I mentioned last time, one might complain of a sore foot, but who knows what the real source of that pain is coming from. That's often the symptom, but not the cause. So I thank you all for joining me today. And for our participants in gallery, we'll continue our discussion together. And I hope you can all join us again next time. Okay, now we can actually talk about the work.